Right, good morning everybody. I'm sorry we're starting late. The previous session used up half an hour of our time. Um, and I see the slides aren't correct. The first presentation, we've got three proposals to talk about during this session from now until lunchtime. That is the no reverse unless assigned, IPv4 address allocation and assignment, and academic IPv4 allocation. So the first one is no reverse unless assigned. Please, can I have the slides up? Hmm? Okay, so while we wait for the slides to appear, let me speak a little about this proposal. It's proposal AFPUB 2012-DNS-001. The title is No Reverse Unless Assigned. It was submitted in April 2012 by Tim McGuinness, and the idea is to solve a problem which some people perceive, where the Afrinic Whois database is not up to date. Not so much in terms of the contact addresses for the organization, but rather in terms of the sub-assignments or sub-delegations that the LIR has made. So if an ISP has a large block of space and they chop it up into small pieces for their smaller customers, the perceived problem is that those smaller allocations or assignments are not correctly reflected in the database. So this proposal is intended to increase the incentive for LIRs to correct the database. And the incentive that this proposal suggests is that DNS reverse delegation for your IP6.ARPA or inaddr.ARPA zone should be refused if you have not correctly updated the registration database. So the existing policy already requires registration, but there's a perception that despite that, it's not really happening, and so the proposal wants to add another incentive or punishment for failure to register. So the policy essentially says that Afrinic will no longer grant reverse delegation unless an assignment or sub-allocation of that address space is registered appropriately in the Afrinic database. Afrinic will contact LIRs who currently have reverse DNS but who have not yet registered assignments or sub-allocations. And there's a grandfather clause for any LIR allocation that was approved before the date of ratification of this proposal. In such cases, Afrinic will not remove the reverse delegation. Okay. So I'm now going to read some extracts from the proposal itself. Summary of the problem being addressed by the proposal. I'll paraphrase. The purpose of the database is to make the information public by registering assignments, and it's the author's experience that Afrinic members are not sufficiently diligent about registering their IPv4 space. So the existing policy even without this proposal, the existing policy already has a clause 9.5 which says assignments remain valid as long as the original criteria are still in place and the assignment is registered. An assignment is therefore invalid if it's not registered or if the purpose has changed or no longer holds. Okay, so that's already in the existing policy. This proposal is an enforcement mechanism of that long-standing policy. Okay, I see I've got my slides up. Can we please fast forward by clicking somewhere? Hello? No, page down? I can do that. No, I can't. It's not working. You still got the wrong version up. It says draft, but don't worry. Okay, now, please click there. Okay, so at last I have my slides. As I was saying a few seconds ago, this clause 9.5, which you can see on the screen, is already part of the existing policy which was approved several years ago. It basically says an assignment becomes invalid if it's not registered or if the purpose has changed. So this proposal is an enforcement mechanism. What it intends to do is to prohibit LIRs from obtaining reverse DNS from Afrinic if they haven't registered everything properly. The actual text of the proposal, I'm not going to read it all. You're free to download my slides and go through it yourself, or to go to the Afrinic policy website and read it. But the essential, the essential part is that you can't get reverse DNS. Afrinic will try to contact you to get you to fix your problems, but specific details are left up to the staff. And if you don't do it, if you don't do it, then you don't get reverse DNS. But if you've already got reverse DNS, it won't be removed. Okay. There's not been very much discussion about it. And could I ask somebody from the Afrinic staff to speak about the staff analysis, please? Madhvi, can you do that, or Ernest? Okay, so Madhvi's coming up to the microphone. She will speak about the Afrinic staff analysis of this proposal.
Good morning, everybody. So the way registration service interprets this proposal is that unless an assignment has been registered or a suballocation for resources that have been allocated to an LIR or even an end user, they will not be able to register the reverse DNS. We have seen there has not been, we haven't been able to Actually, some assignments we have seen that they can be invalid, and normally we ask the ISP if they can update the assignments, which they do. We have seen overlaps for some LIRs regarding the assignments, and they have collaborated with Afrinic to update those as well. Basically, that's it. Okay. So, questions? Do you have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Right, so I think I already mentioned that there's been not very much discussion about this proposal. Okay, so now let's open discussion to the floor. These are some questions or discussion points that I think are worth thinking about. Is there a problem? Will this proposal help? And should it apply to old as well as new? Do we need this if the WHOIS cleanup is performed, or are the two issues sufficiently different that we might need to consider both this proposal and WHOIS cleanup? And something else that I seem to have failed to put on the slide, what happens about large allocations where, say, there's a delegation at the /16 level, but the sub-assignments are made at the /24 or /28 level? How will that actually work technically? Okay, so open to the floor. Please come up to the microphone and say what you think.
Hello, there we go. Okay, just one question. One problem I see with the proposal is, well, firstly, it's already, as you said and read earlier, it's already taken care of by previous policies. If you have you get allocated say a /21, you start using the first one, first /24, then the second /24, it does take a little time for delegation to take place and to replicate. Unfortunately, most of us using these assignments are ISPs, and we don't live in an ideal world where management and sales departments tell you weeks in advance that you're getting new customers and you need to allocate IP ranges. So you might get an example where you need to allocate something pretty quickly. You don't have an assignment, so the reverse delegation hasn't been delegated yet, and you might need the reverse delegation replicated before the assignment's actually been seen and the delegation's taking place. I think that's a very big drawback of the proposal.
Hi, Mark Elkins. I think the whole concept is good. Whether it really needs to be a policy proposal or whether it's simply a trigger mechanism within the MyAfrinic system, so that as soon as you've done an assignment, you can then add your reverse DNS, which is how my mind as a technical person would actually solve the problem goes. I'm not sure. That's why I think it could be simply a technical trigger. When you have a block that's never had reverse DNS, it's a brand new block, you don't really need to have reverse DNS until you do an assignment of some sort, whether it's an internal assignment or whether it's an external assignment to a customer. And it's at that point that you decide that you're doing that you need the reverse DNS. And if that's a mechanism for making sure that the ISP does this properly, then I think that's a nice stick and carrot.
All right, I don't see questions from the audience. I'd like to ask a question of the Afrinic staff, please. It's about how they envisage this policy being implemented if it's passed. So suppose, let's just think about V4 for now, because V6 has a different set of problems. In the IPv4 space, suppose an LRR gets an allocation somewhere between a /24 and a /15. Then the way reverse DNS works is Afrinic would delegate it to the LRR in /24 blocks. That might not be quite the right terminology, but I hope you know what I mean. Reverse DNS works at the octet level. So it seems to me that it would be quite easy for Afrinic to decide, okay, some of those octet blocks get reverse DNS and others don't. But suppose it's larger than a /16. Then the boundary in the reverse DNS between what Afrinic does and what the ISP does is at the /16 boundary. But the size of the sub-allocations are probably much smaller than /16. So Afrinic would not have the technical ability to deny reverse DNS for some of the /24s in a /16. They'd have to either allow or deny the whole /16 as a single unit. So my question to the staff is my opinion of the technical side effects correct, and how do they envisage dealing with it if the proposal is passed?
Um, uh, Maybe if you can make more explanation about this policy, because I really didn't understand what you mean about no reverse DNS delegation. So there will not be a possibility to have a reverse delegation in Afrinic, and if yes, how we can do it? Just I didn't understand. So if you can make more explanation about this policy, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try. It's not my proposal, but I can try to explain a little bit about reverse DNS. So suppose Afrinic gives you some address space, 196.200.123/24. At the same time, they also give you a DNS zone, which is the numbers spelt backwards. So it will be 123.200.196.inaddr.arpa, right? So that DNS zone is very closely associated with the IP address, and you pretty much get them both together from Afrinic. So now my understanding is that this proposal will say, sorry, you don't get the DNS part of it until you register some customers using the IP address.
Yeah, Alan, I was a bit busy with something else. I did not get your question regarding the bit boundaries. Could you just give that to me again?
Okay. Let me repeat or rephrase. If the customer if the LRR gets a /16, then the boundary in the reverse DNS between what Afrinic does and what the ISP does is at the /16 point. And it seems to me that you'd have to either permit or deny reverse delegation at that /16 boundary. And maybe that's a problem because /16 is a lot larger than the typical sub-assignments or sub-allocations that the ISP would be making.
Okay, I don't think it really matters because the proposal only looks at denying reverse DNS at the size of allocation. It doesn't matter if it's a /16, 17, or smaller or larger. If the LIR has not registered utilization of IP addresses to its customers, whether smaller than /16, it doesn't matter. Then reverse DNS will be denied. And again, like I said, bit boundaries don't come into play here. It doesn't really matter. Then another point of information, I think we mentioned somewhere in the assessment that the proposal does not talk about end users who actually do not register customer assignments because they take IP addresses just for their own use, and perhaps it also needs to address those. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So then my understanding would be, is say I'm an ISP, I get a /16 of V4 space, I register 1/28, which I assign to one customer, and that's enough to allow Afrinic to provide reverse DNS for the entire /16. That's what the proposal says. Okay. Right. Comments from the floor? I see nobody. Okay, let's proceed then to try to check whether we have consensus. Okay, so I'd like to ask the people in this room to think about whether you support this proposal. Do you think that it should proceed to last call on the mailing list? I'll ask yes and no as two separate options. So first, if you support this proposal, if you think that it should go on to last call on the mailing list, please raise your hand. Right, thank you. I see a few hands. Finally, if you oppose this proposal, if you think that it should not proceed to last call, please raise your hand. And that might be because you think it should be changed or because you just totally hate it. For any reason, if you think it should not proceed to last call. Okay. Also very few hands, but I think there were slightly more in favor. It's hard for me to judge with so many people not answering either yes or no. Shall we try again? Okay, please raise your hands if you support this proposal. Okay. Please raise your hands if you oppose this proposal. No? Right. Okay. Let me confer with my co-chair. We'll need to discuss whether we see consensus in this room. Okay, so we think we have sufficient rough consensus. There are some people opposed to the proposal, but we do seem to have significantly more in favor. So the co-chairs declare that we have rough consensus in favor of this proposal. Thank you, everybody. Right, now let's move on to the next one, which is IPv4 allocation and assignment. Do we have SM on the line for his remote presentation? Right. There seem to be technical problems getting SM on the line, so we're going to change the order. We will move now to Andrew Alston speaking about the IPv4 allocation proposal.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for the slides there, first of all, thank you very much for having me. This proposal was drafted by myself and Sunday, sitting over there, and I'm sure when the questions come up, Sunday and I are both available to answer them. We drafted this policy, I'm just waiting for the slides here quickly and I'll go into the details. Okay, there we go. A little bit of background about this proposal. The proposal is designed to make it easier for higher education institutes and academia to access IP resources. There were a couple of concerns over how difficult it has been to actually access resources for academia when it comes to justifying what they need those resources for, what infrastructure they have. And so we wrote this to try and make it easier. We want to reduce the dependence on network address translation. I'm not sure at the moment whether or not it is formally stated, but there does seem to be a consensus that I've observed anyway, that AFRINIC will not promote the use of network address translation. It causes many, many issues, and particularly in a research environment where you're playing with a lot of protocols, you need a lot of end-to-end connectivity, you've got a lot of issues with NAT, and simply when something does go wrong and you want to trace it back to an individual, if you're NATing, that can be an absolute disaster when you've got 30, 40,000 people behind a single NAT. It can really create a lot of problems. The proposal is also designed to encourage IPv6 rollout, and in fact, if you wish to apply for space under this policy as an academic institution, you are required to prove that you are going to do IPv6. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It also removes the need to provide proof of certain completely unquantifiable elements. When I mention an unquantifiable element, I refer specifically to where institutions are rolling out Wi-Fi networks. Have an institution, one very good example, client of mine's got 60-odd thousand students on campus. They're rolling out 1,200 access points on campus. Now, you need a lot of address space to address 60,000 people on Wi-Fi networks. The average student carrying anywhere up to 3 devices. That's a lot of address space. However, when you have to provide proof of infrastructure to AFRINIC to justify that you need addresses, what have you got? 1,200 access points. You've got your staff and student numbers, which you can provide, but then comes the whole argument about concurrent IP utilization on the network. And how do you quantify that? You cannot roll out the Wi-Fi network without the space, which means you can't get a concurrency count until you've got the space. It's a chicken and egg situation. So what we did was we said, let's base the number of addresses an institution can get on their combined staff and student headcount. Those figures are available, they are published. Every university has a student registration system. They've all got HR systems that they can pull that information out. It's clearly defined, and it is something that can be submitted. Then take that and apply a multiplier to it. Now, originally when we wrote this policy proposal, we put that multiplier at a ×3, which allowed for multiple concurrent devices on any one person on campus, because the fact is the majority of people are carrying smartphones. They need IPs for those. There is a huge increase in tablets and notebooks. You need IPs for those. You need IPs for the infrastructure itself, all of the university servers, the switches, etc., etc. Interestingly enough, and I was actually quite surprised by this, after extensive discussion on the mailing list, we revised this from a 3-to-1 to a 5-to-1 multiplier, and that was what we viewed as what we were being asked for on the mailing list, and it was quite a substantial discussion. When I've run statistics at some of the other universities in South Africa, you're generally on the Wi-Fi networks already sitting at about a 3.2 concurrency. And on a 3.2 concurrency, when you add the university's infrastructure, etc., I would have actually said a ×4 multiplier would have been probably a little bit more fair, but we're open to discussion on that. As I said, the policy, if you want to apply under this, mandates IPv6 rollout. You cannot go and say, I'm doing IPv6 rollout just in my core. We want the IPv6 rollout to the edge. You've got to provide either a very clear plan on how you're going to do that, or a demonstration of the fact that you are actively doing that. Otherwise, you don't qualify under this proposal. It goes onto standard allocation procedures. Then this policy also defines higher education institutes as de facto end users instead of LIRs. This comes from the fact that there has been a fair amount of debate as to whether or not you can define a university as an LIR or an end user, because they have students. They have students living in residences. Now, if a student is living in a residence, the IT department in the vast majority of cases is in control of all of the infrastructure within that residence, other than the stuff that the students are plugging into. That, by definition, makes them an end user. Obviously, if the university is allocating space to schools or to external third-party legal entities, then they become an LIR. And there is nothing in this policy that stops them stating, I wish to be an LIR. They may choose that option, but by default, they are classified as end users, because we believe that that was the fair way to go. Then the policy does away with the requirement to provide detailed infrastructure. A university, by the very nature of its existence, where it is teaching students, where it is doing research, has to have infrastructure on the ground. If you've got the institution providing proof of accreditation, proof that they exist, proof of their students and staff, it can be assumed that they have infrastructure or are constantly upgrading it. And it does away with that need to justify concurrency, which, as I say, is completely unquantifiable, and it makes the process a lot simpler and will reduce the time taken for allocations. As an example, one of the universities in South Africa applied for space. It took almost 7 weeks to get that space and delayed a number of critical projects and cost a lot of money. A lot of that was the arguments about the concurrency, and we need to reduce that. It doesn't make sense to make an institution that is trying to help its students and staff get better access to resources for education, wait weeks and weeks and weeks for space, while arguments happen on unquantifiable elements. A little bit more detail, as I said, the Wi-Fi networks. The Wi-Fi networks on campuses are becoming more and more prevalent. You are seeing that as almost the default mechanism of rolling out internet access to students on campus. One of the reasons for this is because for a university to start providing lab seats in a university becomes extremely expensive for the university. we worked it out that by the time you've put the PC in the lab, you've run a network point, you've bought the PC, etc., you're looking at between $2,000 and $3,000 per lab seat. Another example of one university in South Africa that has a 1,500-man lab at a huge expense. That lab is full, 24 hours a day. There are students queuing to get into it. We had to up the IP allocations to that lab because we assumed within the lab that not all 1,500 PCs would be in use. Well, turns out otherwise. The lab was absolutely full. When we rolled out the wireless, though, we found that the labs were less full, there were less queues because students start bringing their own devices. Without the space, the Wi-Fi networks become impossible. As I said, we changed the ratio. After extensive debate, we are quite prepared to have further discussion on that if necessary. And if this community feels that the ratio of 5:1 is too high, we're open to discussion on it. I need to stress this next point. We are not attempting to deal with fees. When Sundar and I wrote this, we went into this policy proposal fully acknowledging that fees are the purview of the board. They are not part of the policy development process. So we are not trying to make anything cheaper. We believe that, Afrinic already gives a 50% discount to academia, and we thank Afrinic for that. And this policy actually specifically ties to any discounts that Afrinic is offering. It doesn't say that they get a discount. It says if there is anything on offer, then it is tied to that. As I said about the documentation, we are not trying to eliminate all documentation to allow just anyone to grab space and hoard it. Not at all. We are asking universities to prove that they are accredited and that they have staff and students, etc. Now, it's very easy to go and register an institution and call them a foundation or an academic institution, etc. Anybody can do it. You can go and register a company with any name tomorrow. That is very different from asking for accreditation as an academic institution. Accreditation for an academic institution typically has to come from government entities. It has to be, there is documentation associated with it. So we are asking for documentation. All we are doing is removing the need for the documentation for the actual infrastructure, which can be incredibly difficult to provide, particularly when it comes to issues like concurrency, and because of the vast size of these networks. I've got an institution that's got 900 edge switches, 20,000 end user ports. The amount of documentation there is substantial. And when Afrinic starts asking for invoices as well, you end up with a problem where, because of the nature of academia, they get a lot of special pricing on their equipment. But that's all under NDA, which means that if I've got to submit an invoice to Afrinic, I've got to sit there with a pile of invoices this thick and manually redact every single invoice before I can submit it. Now, quite frankly, Afrinic doesn't need to know what I'm paying for the equipment, so the redaction is fine. I don't think Afrinic objects to it. But it delays the whole process, and it makes it extremely complicated. We were also asking the institution to provide a letter from their management stating that the space will not be assigned outside of the campus if they are defined as an end user. We do not want institutions applying for space as end users and then acting as LIRs. So we require a commitment from the institution that that will not happen. And such letters have been submitted to Afrinic in the process of applications before. So there is precedent for Afrinic actually accepting such letters. And that's the proposal. And yeah, any questions, I'm quite willing to take them. Thanks very much.
Can we? Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. Before moving to the comment, I would like the Afrinic staff to talk about analysis.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Anvi Gokul, the Registration Service Manager, and will present the staff comments on this proposal. The proposal mentions higher education institutions and academic institutions in two separate clauses, and we think that there should be a specific definition of such institutions. Secondly, section 3.9 Section 3.9 of this proposal is in contradiction with Section 7.3 and 7.4 of the currently IPv4 address allocation and assignment policy by exempting applicants under this proposal to submit documentation relating to networks in question. Now, Section 7.3 and 7.4 in the IPv4 allocation policy says that to properly evaluate requests, RIRs must carefully examine all relevant documentation, and there's also a fairness clause saying policies and practices will apply fairly and equitably to all existing and potential members. Our third comment is the scope of Section 3.3 regarding the details of planned and current IPv6 rollouts, including committed timeframes for the rollout of IPv6. So we are asking if this check shall be enforced, for example, when the higher education institution comes back for an additional range of IPv4 addresses, or should information on the planned rollout be submitted in the IPv4 request or in a simultaneous IPv6 request, and what shall be the committed timeframes, for example, in the number of months that's specified in the policy. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhvi. Andrew, do you have something to say about analysis?
I just want to address a couple of the points on the analysis. With regards to the definition of such institutions, I don't think there's any problem putting in a definition, though by virtue of the fact that we are asking for accreditation of the institutions, that largely covers that, because an academic institution, when we talk about academic accreditation, that would typically come from an education department within a government, etc. So that is, we feel that that is largely covered, but we are prepared to put a definition in there. There is no issue with that. With regards to the contradiction in 7.3 and 7.4 with Section 3.9, policy by standard supersedes other policy. So when you update a policy and you propose a new policy, the policy supersedes the old policy. So this is not a contradiction, it is a supersede of what is in there in the specific case under the specific policy. That is how we view it, rather than a contradiction. It supersedes, it doesn't contradict. Then with regards to the question of the fees, we don't believe that that's an issue, because as I said in my presentation, the fees in this thing, we're not trying to change fees, adjust fees. We said if there is a discount available when at the time of application, then that discount would apply. If there isn't, it wouldn't. So it is tied back in to what is currently the normal fee schedule. We haven't actually attempted to force a discount, it's tied back in there. Then with regards to the planned V6 rollouts, if you're applying for space under this, and you've already got V6 allocations, then yes, you need to provide the plan at the time of application. What you're doing, etc., how you're doing it with that space. If, however, you're sitting in a situation where you don't have V6 or V4, when you apply for this, you have to apply for V6 at the same time with a plan to use it, because otherwise you cannot fulfill that requirement. And so, yeah, those are the comments on the staff analysis.
Thank you, Andrew. So before giving the floor for comment, there was some discussion point just in front of you. Do higher education institutions need multiple IP address per student, or will this proposal help? Is there any problem? Should it be addressed through policy or through staff training? If this proposal is generally on the right track, should the number be changed? So the floor is open for comment. Thank you. Yes, Mark.
We're here. Great. I find some of the arguments that Andrew has raised somewhat almost inappropriate. One of the arguments was, for example, it cost him lots of money because it took too long to get the IPv4 address space or the IPv6 address space. That to me is a non-argument. When you are planning to get IPv4 or IPv6 address space, any resource from Afrinic, you have no idea how long it's going to take. You don't know whether it's going to be accepted or refused. You can't build business and financial models on the fact that you expect to get address space within, say, 2 weeks or something from Afrinic. There were a number of arguments along those lines which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
This is
Yes, Douglas.
I just had two observations. I'm in between support and not non-support, but I wanted to point out paragraph, I think, section 3.1 actually details the specific documents that are required by an applicant for addressing space. It is my view that this is a policy, and this level of detail would fall under maybe an operational guideline rather than in a policy. Also in section, I believe, 3.4, which actually defines what an IPv6 rollout is. Here it's saying that for a true V6 rollout, it should go to the edge of the network. It is my view also that this prescribes and tells operators how to run their networks, which is not within the purview of the RIR. Thank you.
Yes, Fiona?
Okay, in addition to what Douglas has raised, I think I would like to add that the entire idea of the proposal is good. Looking at where our continent is and where we want to go moving forward, I think we need to pay some special consideration to academic institutions in as far as their need for IP address space is concerned. Whether the students, one student will have more than one IP address space or not, may be something that we may need to, not to dig into, but to consider, being that we want, some of these students have been very good, like take Kenya for example, a lot of the mobile applications are coming from the students. How do they get to do that? They need to be able to have access to a network that gives them more than just the one IP that they would ordinarily have. Yes, we're putting up a lot of technical labs all over the place, but to subsidize the functionality of those labs, if we had a proper arrangement with the universities as research centers, they would complement the work of the tech labs substantially. So I think that the idea behind this proposal is really good. There may be a few things in terms of the wording and admin issues coming into it that we need to look into. So I would support this as a proposal that would steer the institutions of higher learning to the next level.
Thank you. Would you please introduce yourself, then go ahead.
I'm Isaac. I work for ANNREN in Uganda. Can you hear me? No. I just want to thank Andrew for trying to simplify this. It's an old principle in engineering to keep it simple, stupid. That makes work faster. So we really appreciate this that is being proposed. I just want to comment on the verification. Because you based this on numbers, you ask institutions to give you. As a check, can we also ask them to give you their bandwidth uptake, just to check that the numbers are okay? Then secondly, I think it would be good to plan in growth so that when you're allocating this space, people don't have to come back after a short time because many universities are still growing. Otherwise, I think it's a good principle.
For me, this proposal sounds a bit like forcing IP address down the throat of those who may not need it. I'm totally against it because I think at the core of IP address allocation is the requirement to demonstrate the need for it, and whether it's educational or operators or religious or whatever, you still need to demonstrate the need for those IP address.
I'm Jude from Uganda, and I had two questions. The lady had hinted on if you have a plan to deploy V6, but then it's, and you come with it, and then you get this much V4, what happens if you actually don't follow your plan? And then don't you think that if there is no sort of penalty, should you not follow your plan, this will give people the benefits of V6 on V4, and therefore retard the deployment of V6? And then the other question is that compared to other companies like ISPs, where we mentioned things like the lack of knowledge by top management, and the fact that you don't want to disrupt revenue flows by changing your core to V6 and things like that, I think these are challenges that are not faced largely by universities compared to ISPs and the rest. So why would you want them to go for V4 instead of moving on to V6 when they have the skill and they don't face as much risk as the corporate companies? Thank you.
Yes, Maimuna.
Thank you. I would like just to add my voice and those who are not will not be happy with this proposal, because I think we need to be careful on at this stage of development in Africa. Our higher education institutions are not requesting address most of the time. I think it is a specific case, for example, for one country or two. And I wonder if, for example, the staff can inform us on how many requests they get, the first. The second, I think we have to also adopt policy which will not contrast our policy. Our first policy says that we need to justify the use of the address. If we apply for a number of address, we have to justify it, even if you are from education institution or another area. And my last question, my last issue will be, how many institutions in Africa have the infrastructure to be sure that this address will not be used just on spamming? Because we have a lot of problem on spam in our university or the public institution. How many institutions can give us the assurance that if we will provide address, the address will not be used on spamming? Thank you.
Yes, Mark.
Mark Elkins here again. I do agree that educational institutions and meetings in generally do need more than one IP address per participant or student. That I personally felt the effect of in Baku, where there were a couple of thousand people and they seemed to have just 1,000 IP addresses for people to use. Yet the people going to that meeting had a laptop, a cell phone, and a couple of other devices, an iPad or something like that. And that was really, really painful. So I definitely agree that it makes sense that students who are also rather similar have more than one IP address. Can they qualify under existing policies, or should Afrinic staff be more lenient perhaps towards universities? Yes, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem, in fact, with the African region burning up its IP address for space a little bit faster so that we can fit in with the rest of the world. And I believe that this policy might help us in that direction. So I'm not opposed to this policy, but we'll see how it goes.
Madhvi?
Okay, I just want to respond to Maimuna's request from staff regarding the number of requests we've received. At the top of my head, I think this year we've received about 10 requests from universities and research and education networks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just while you're at the mic, as a matter of interest, from the beginning of last year to now, do you have any idea on the sum total of the space that was allocated? What was the average size of the request and what was allocated?
Okay, I have to look at the stats and tell you, Andrew. I'm sorry about this.
Fiona again.
Yes, please go ahead. Then Andrew and Sandy will be answer to the questions.
I would just like us to look at where we are as a continent vis-a-vis where the other institutions are. I want us to think of the universities in Europe and in America and think of how they are supporting the development of ICTs by the kind of infrastructure that they have available to their students in terms of being able to give them access to the internet and being able to get them to effectively try out. Yes, the spamming may happen, but it can be addressed. It is not like it's something that cannot be managed with all the involvement we have in terms of setting up SATs and monitoring and all that. I think we can address the spamming issues, and I would like to ask us to look at the universities that have so much legacy space in America that has gotten them to start the Facebooks and all that, and honestly, I'm seeing an opportunity for us to push and to drive our academic students to a different level. Yes, they are not asking for that space, but if we give gave it to them and let them know that they have the opportunity of having access to so much IP address space, we would definitely be changing the game plan in terms of how what they are able to do with it. And without sounding like I'm really pitching so hard for this proposal, I would like us to think of where we want Africa to be in the next 5 years. There are universities that are ready. The 10 universities that are applying is because they are ready to some level to try it out. But how do we best go about it? Thanks.
Thank you.
The sense that I'm getting from Mark's last conversation or Mark's last comment is that we're on the right track, but maybe there's a little bit of tweaking required. But the sense I'm getting in terms of possibility of abuse, some of the other questions, is not really tweaking or restrictions that AFRINIC can impose. I'm getting the sense that instead this is possibly a university initiative that needs to run, whether it's through Ubuntunet or otherwise, in terms of a code of best practice. Because I think in terms of IP address allocation, as Fiona very eloquently put it, the need to allocate addresses, to me, is clear. I think what's at issue is once those addresses are allocated, how do we ensure that they're not potentially abused, that the best use is made of them? And to that effect, I would suggest that the university's community, the academic community, the NRIN community, should look at some sort of code of best practice that they can roll out to the universities once you have an allocation, how to use it, how to ensure or to, as far as possible, prevent or avoid or mitigate abuse. And I would suggest that would then really deal with the concerns we're dealing with here. I don't think that AFRINIC, through its policy, needs to deal with the fact that a university may need to implement certain processes and policies internally to ensure that there's not an abusive use of network resources.
Thank you. Andrew and Sandy, you have the floor for.
Okay, thank you very much. Quite many of the comments are fair, but the first one I would want to address is that of fairness. Fairness is very important and something AFRINIC needs to bother about. Every student today is a business leader in the next 5-10 years. So the fact that they don't have an opportunity to have a say today does not mean we should not protect them in 5 years' time. So I think that really is fair, okay? Because today they don't have a voice. In 5-10 years' time, they will be the entrepreneurs, they will be the business leaders, and we don't want to tell them then that there are no more IP addresses. The second is, for those who followed the reason why we came up with this, AFRINIC still has IP address spaces. It's exhausted in some other regions. There are people willing to come and take out of our own IPs. Do we wait for them to take it, devising means and techniques, and we cannot respond? I don't think so. It's also in the interest of Africa for us to burn our remaining V4 pool so that we will be at par with the rest of the world. We don't want equipment dumped on us because we can still NAT and we are not in a position to use V6. So definitely, it also helps us if our V4 pool quickly runs out and fairly to where it can be used. There's no better place it can be used than academic institutions because they are the ones that build the future generation, and everybody end up passing through them in the course of becoming somebody in life. There's a comment about why we are bothered, whether it's at the edge or at the core, and we should not be dictating how networks are run by providers. Recognize the fact that these are end users. They are not businesses. Universities are end users by the definition we're trying to give to this policy in the proposal. There is also the comment about whether NREN should look into code of conduct to prevent abuse. I believe in this hall we have quite a number of people from that constituency, and I think they are in the best position to speak up about what they want. There was a comment about you setting out to get address spaces and not knowing whether you would get it or not. I don't think anybody would expect not to get IP address spaces as at the time you are setting out to get them. Because part of the justification currently is to ask for all the hardware and including serial numbers. And if you have invested that much money and at the end of the day you are not going to get IP address spaces, there's a big problem there. We all know what universities are doing. We all know what they're capable of doing. So it's really a fair open box that everybody can see. And that's why we brought out the measure of using the student lecturer population as a basis of second guessing what should go to them. I think I have covered most of the issues that were raised without wasting time.
For me, I just want to respond to the comment about spam, specifically that comment. If an institution is using live IP addresses and there is spam coming out of that institution, it can be traced back to an IP address and be dealt with. If you force an institution into a situation where they are network address translating and there is spam coming out of that institution, all you've got is your network address translation. You cannot find the machine. You cannot deal with the problem. So in fact, by stopping institutions having the problem, you make the spam problem worse, not better, because you make it that much harder to deal with.
Yes, Mike, you're the last one, and then we will be moving forward.
Thank you for your answer. I wonder if you can come back to the issue. The issue is giving more address to the academic institution. And my worry was about the use of this address. I'm not talking about the technical issue of spam. But in some area in our country, we have, most of the time, we don't have the infrastructure in the institution right now.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed it.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is the readiness and the awareness of those institutions to get more address. I don't have any problem to give more address because it is the job of Afrinic. But I don't want this issue to turn on Afrinic has to help institution and education. Afrinic is doing a lot of things on it, on training our people. And I think we have to be, like you're talking about the fairness. Afrinic is doing a lot of work on training. Right now, it is, we come back to the resource allocation. And I think we need to be careful when we come to this proposal to give more address to the student. I don't want to say that it's not useful. It can be useful, but it depends on the development of the institution, of the development of the country. And you talk some country like in West Africa, we have a lot of issue on spamming and other things. Even if you don't have a lot of address, if you have a public address everywhere, what will happen? That's the problem. The issue I want to raise is the perception that the region gives to the others. I'm not talking about, having a laptop or several tools to go to the internet. It's not the issue. The issue is this proposal will just goes to several institution. There is not a lot of people on, a lot of countries who need that. Perhaps it's South Africa who need that, but most of the time in our region, we are not at this stage that the university has this infrastructure. Even they don't have this infrastructure, so they don't need this policy. Are we here to set up policies for specific demand, or those specific demand has to use the current policy? That's my question.
I'm sorry, Memuna, it's a bit fuzzy what you're driving at. In case of spam, having live IP addresses means that every individual can be traced. Every network has a means of authentication and authorization. We're not in the business of running people's networks for them, but we know what is possible and how it can be done. This actually makes it much easier for every organization to track exactly who is accessing their resources. So I think this proposal actually makes it much, much, much easier for the institutions to do exactly what you are worried about. Secondly, in terms of how other regions perceive us, Memuna, it is cheaper to go to Europe and back to where I come from than to come to this meeting. It's much, much more expensive to travel within Africa. So we have peculiar problems that does not tally with what other continents or other IRR have. So if we are trying to solve a problem our own way, I think we can just try to be reasonable and fair, not self-serving to other people. As I said, so many academic institutions, there was a poll earlier on, how many people heard about ICANN? Maybe 4 or 5 hands. How many institutions even know where to obtain IP addresses? As far as they are concerned, 192.168.0. whatever is what you use. That's IP address. And that's their knowledge. So this will open up even opportunities to have much more institutions get these things out there. I don't want to monopolize time. There are many people on the queue.
Thank you, Sanji. We are running out of the time, so I'll be just taking the first 2 guys on the macro. I'm sorry, it will be a continual error.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Samina Khal from
Those
Egypt.
first one only. Sorry.
I'm first?
Yes.
Okay, so...
those first one, 2 on both macro. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Merci beaucoup. I will speak in English or French. Okay. My name is... mon nom est Ousmane Moussa, c'est ça. Wakren West and Central African Research and Education Network. Véritablement, nous accueillons avec beaucoup de soulagement cette perspective d'allocation des adresses IP de cette manière, pour la simple et bonne raison que, à l'heure actuelle, ce qui nous a retardé dans le processus d'acquisition de ces adresses IP au niveau des institutions d'enseignement et de recherche, c'était le problème de la connectivité. Il est certain, d'ici 3 ans, disons d'ici 5 ans, il n'y aura plus de problème de connectivité au sein de ces institutions d'enseignement. Faut-il attendre que le problème de la connectivité soit résolu pour qu'on revienne retrouver le problème de pouvoir accéder à ces éléments d'accès? Définitivement, je pense qu'il est important que tous les acteurs de ces institutions d'enseignement et de recherche se préparent, bien sûr, pour une meilleure gestion de ces adresses IP. Je ne crois pas qu'une institution universitaire va pouvoir acquérir des adresses IP et en faire un usage comme ça. Ce n'est pas dans son intérêt. Au moins, pour éviter certaines fraudes sur les diplômes, sur ceci, sur cela, ne vous en faites pas. Il y a beaucoup d'enjeux qui ne sont pas nécessairement des enjeux économiques. Ce sont des enjeux académiques, ce sont des enjeux au niveau de la recherche. Donc, vraiment, merci pour ceux qui ont pensé à faire cette proposition et je suis sûr que tous, avec les réseaux d'éducation et de recherche, vont supporter cette proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go through that. Can you please be short?
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Saman Nakhal from Egypt. I have a question to the authors. In Egypt, we have yearly 500,000 students join universities and high institute. So according to this policy, how many IPs we have to ask Afrinic yearly? And if you think this is a good way to consume IPs in Afrinic pool, so I support this policy.
Yes,
I'm Sheun from Nigeria. I come from education sector, and I kind of identify with this need. Luckily for me, I'm also from a new university where we are actually looking for funds for infrastructure. So it makes it quite difficult to get IP that will be required for maybe students that will be coming up in the next 3 years or next 2 years. So I think this policy, I support it, and just the point that it allows an institution to be able to get IP allocation without infrastructure. The fact is that in Nigeria, where I come from, miracles do happen within 1 day. Infrastructures can be gotten within 1 day. It just depends on the leadership. It depends on the person that is coming to be vice chancellor or to be rector. So we can get infrastructure within 1 day, but we can't get IP address within 1 day. So I think you should help us, and let's help ourselves, and also, especially to the level of, let's own this IP address before it gets out of hand. Thank you.
Thank you, son.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Ishen, and I wear 2 hats in this argument. The first hat is that I volunteer for the National Research Education Network of Ghana. At the same time, I'm the ICT director for one of the largest private universities in Ghana. In fact, one of my applications as the ICT director for the university, I'm one of the 10 that was talked about because we filed our application there. And currently, the task of trying to get all the material ready is what has actually delayed the process. So I support this proposal very well because I'm a direct beneficiary of it, and it's actually going to help my institution and other institutions in Ghana to have the right IP addresses that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Madhvi has an answer, I think for Andrew. Can you go ahead, please?
I'm Madhvi, Registration Service Manager at Afrinic. To answer Andrew's question about the number of universities who have received resources, I'm talking about IPv4 resources from Afrinic since 1st of January 2012. We have 10 of those, and we also have free research and education networks that have already received their allocations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question regarding the size. So it's a minimum of a /24 up to a maximum of a /15, okay, for some universities. A minimum of a /22 for research and education networks, and a maximum of a /16. Okay?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Aminata Garba. I'm from Niger, and I would like to comment on the ratio of IP address per student. And my question is, why do we think of a static allocation, like 5 to 1? It can be maybe a dynamical allocation according to the needs of the universities and according to the need of the higher institutions, and this maybe can allow us to use it for other institutions not only higher education, because we know that in other countries, students start using internet at a very early stage on education. So maybe instead of only looking for higher education, this can be also looking for other education institution, and dynamic allocation can be a way of looking at it according to the needs of the universities and the educational institutions. Thank you.
Just to make a quick clarification, we're not fixing the figure. A university can apply for 2 to 1 if that's what they're comfortable with. But if they want 10 to 1, then they need to justify that beyond the provisions in the policy. So it's not a fixed ratio that must be handed out. Of course, they can request for a lower ratio if they so need it.
Okay, that will be the last comment. Let's get that.
Hello? Okay. I really also feel I would be doing injustice to my institution. I'm Perez Masco from Uganda. I feel I would be doing injustice to my institution, where I come from, if I don't really support this policy. Because I personally, I have faced a few challenges with IP addresses. So I really feel we shouldn't have this situation where you find an IP address is standing between a student or a lecturer finishing an assignment or a project, that it's an IP address standing in between that student or lecturer. So we should really make sure that at least we remove this restriction that of having one, for example, IP address per student or per staff. We give them a freedom to do their projects freely, such that we concentrate on other things. If we really would ask how many really want to have even IP addresses, such that our pool is actually not taken away, I think I would be the first to put up my hand, such that we can have the already assigned resources remaining in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so okay, then let's see whose one is in support on this proposal, so that we can just put it on last comment, or whether there is who those of you guys are not in support of it. So we will start with whose one is in support of this proposal. Who support, please? Okay. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. And those who doesn't support the proposal? Okay, that's fine. Okay. Thank you. Just let me have just 1 minute with my my co-chair, so that we will see if there is consensus or not.
Chairs, before you declare consensus, I wanted to ask, perhaps if the 2 questions you asked were, we could have had a 3rd question, because I got a sense from some people who have support in principle for the policy, but don't exactly support the current draft and the current wording of the policy.
I think, well, Douglas, can you please just come back on your question, please?
I think he's asking that, do we understand the fact that some people just support the policy in principle, but not the specific wordings?
That's correct, Sandy, because my understanding is this policy is going to be passed in its current form, and that is what we just voted for. We got overwhelming support to pass it in its current form, which for me is rather... Thank you.
I believe in our presentation we stated clearly that the ratios and specifics are still subject to the position of members, so it's not cast in stone. And I believe this is not the last call on the proposal. This is not the last call.
Actually, from process, it's going to last call with this consensus in this current form, I think.
Right. Thanks, Douglas. My understanding is that the authors are free to make some very small modifications in between now and last call, and I have asked the authors to make 2 changes coming out of the discussion at this meeting. There was a comment from the staff that in one point in the proposal they talked about higher educational institutions, and somewhere else they talked about academic institutions. So we can just use the same terminology everywhere consistently. That's one change that I'd like to see. And as far as the 5-to-1 ratio, the authors have told me that it's their intention that the institution applying for address space can choose a lower ratio if they want to. So if you think that you only need a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio, the authors say that you're free to do that. And so I've asked them to amend the proposal to make that more clear. So let me repeat the voting based on the idea that it's not in its exact current form, but it's after the authors have made those 2 small changes, then it can go to last call on the mailing list. Okay, so everybody who supports that idea, please raise your hands. All right, and everybody opposed? Right, thank you. Sorry. Okay, I had my microphone off. All right, so it seems pretty clear that we do have consensus to move forward on this. I see some people queuing at the microphone. Do you still want to speak about this proposal? I thought we'd finished talking about it, but...
Oh, I think we have, and I'm really pleased we have consensus. But I thought it would be easier to come to the mic to make an announcement, to invite all the people from all the participants from the Western Central region to a Wakren meeting at the Nali Kwanda Hall at 3:30. So it's all participants from the Western Central African region to a Wakren meeting. Wakren is the Western Central African Research Education Network, as you know, and it's holding at 3:30. Thank you.
Mine's just as questions. My name is Badrin Taiga. We have a preferential pricing for academia. We're now kind of voting to give them a whole lot of resources. Are we going to give them to them at the same costing? Because I think that is going to be a little bit risky for our entity. And why can't we make that into an IPv6 allocation, since we're trying to push IPv6? Might be out of order, just a question.
Okay, let me just clarify on this whole issue of fees here, right? When you apply for V4 address space, currently under AFRINIC, you get a 50% discount as an academic institution. Whether or not that remains or not, that is the purview of the board. It is not the purview of the policy committee, and I believe that that is the way it should remain. So we did not touch the issue of fees in this policy. Now, if you are concerned that you're suddenly getting a lot more resources and therefore are going to be pushed into the next allocation bracket and hence going to have to pay more, you do have the option to specify a lower ratio and get less space. So reducing that, obviously you're not going to get the same amount of space then. So the ratio that we defined at the 5-to-1, you have the option, that is what you qualify for with the documentation specified in the policy. You would have to pay appropriate fees with relevant discounts, etc., for that space. If you want more than that, you've got to provide more documentation. If you want less, you have the option to do that and pay whatever the fee boundaries are for whatever you're getting at the lower rate. But the policy itself does not touch fees. With regards to the IPv6 allocation, I had a couple of comments here on the floor that I picked up that people confuse the need to, saying to me, why can't they just go V6 totally? The reality is there is still a lot of V4 on the internet. We need to get V6 out there. But you need to do that in a dual stack form at the moment, because if you go V6 only, you're not going to be able to access a large portion of the internet. That's reality at the moment. So what we said is we will force people under this policy to roll out V6 in a dual stack format, so they will have V6 for the day where the rest of the world is running V6 only. But at the same time, we will give them V4 that allows them to access the current internet. Because without the current V4, you're not getting onto the current internet or a large portion of it. So it's a way of serving both worlds in the best way possible. Hope that answers your question.
Right. We've gone way over our time. I still see people at the microphones, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your comments. Please save them for the open mic session later this afternoon. We now break for lunch. There was a third proposal scheduled to be discussed in the morning session. We'll move that to after lunch. Okay, so after lunch we have, I think it's 2 more proposals to discuss, and the open mic session, and finally the election of the PDMG co-chair who will be replacing me as I step down. Okay, thank you. It's lunchtime.